All right, guys, it's 2022, and after the past 2 tumultuous years, you're still standing, and you're back in the saddle, even as too many other people have developed a habit of staying home, playing around online, and watching others have adventures on big screen TVs. What are you going to do to rebel against falling into that exact same rut? Well, as Hunter Thompson wrote years ago, life should not be a journey to the grave with the intention of arriving safely in a pretty and well-preserved body, but rather to skid in broadside in a cloud of smoke, thoroughly used up, totally worn out, and loudly proclaiming, "Wow, what a ride." So how about it? Is your life more like a ghost town still than the Wild West? Well, say screw it to the suburban sleepwalk and join me for Unsettled. Get all the info at mountaintoppodcast.com/unsettled.
Live from the mist-enshrouded mountaintop fortress that is X and Y Communications headquarters, you're listening to the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. And now, here's your host, Scot McKay.
All right, gentlemen, welcome to yet again another episode of the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. My name is Scot McKay. You can find me at Scot McKay on Twitter, and really, you can search my name on just about any social media platform, SCOTMCKAY, and find me. The website is mountaintoppodcast.com. And gentlemen, if you have not joined our thriving Facebook group at the Mountaintop Summit, well, you really should do that. We're having a lot of fun. Speaking of having a lot of fun, I really love the topic that is on the table for today. And it's one that like I often say, I've been wanting to do for a long time. I have lots of topics on my list of topics I'd love to cover. This one was near the top. I just needed the right guest, once again, as always, to have this conversation with. And I found that gentleman in the form of Mr. Roger Williams, who hosts his own podcast, which is entirely on the subject at hand today. He calls it the Crossing It Off podcast. And what is he crossing off? Well, bucket list items, of course, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Roger, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, Scott, thanks a lot. I'm really excited to be here with you.
Well, I tell you what, just a couple days ago, my lovely bride, Emily, and I were on your show as well and had a great time talking about world travel and really only scratching the surface when it comes to all the things, all the adventures, all the fun we've had, simply because we put a list together detailing what we wanted to do. And, for lack of a better way of saying it, go ahead and doing it. So talk to me about what inspired you to think a lot about bucket lists in general, and particularly building one and crossing things off of it, which I'm sure you've done a lot of yourself, or else you wouldn't be doing the podcast, right?
Yeah, at least during the last year I have, year and a half, 2 years. Like a lot of people, I saw the movie The Bucket List in 2007, and I was in my mid 30s or so, and I was like, oh, that's something you do when you're older, right? It's something. So I had things in my head that I wanted to put on there when the time came, and I thought, oh, I'm healthy. Nothing's going to happen to me. When I retire and I'm 65, I'm going to do this. And it's interesting because there's no mention of the word bucket list in the English lexicon before 2007. It's that new of a concept, actually, to have this list of things that you want to do before you die. And it's interesting because 95% of the American people would say that they have a bucket list, but only 40% of those are actually actively doing it. And that was me. I had this list in my head. I hadn't written it down, and it was just things. One day I'll get to that. I have family, wife, job responsibilities, and so I'll put that off. And when it came time in 2020, when everyone was kind of sitting at home, and I'd been in the same career for almost 30 years, and I had more time to think about myself and everything, I wound up having a heart attack in 2020 in December, right before 2021. And when you get to that point in your life, you have to just kind of look and say, what is important to me? Where do I find my self-worth? And that's where I found myself at the beginning of 2021.
Yeah, it's kind of a reckoning, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, you feel like, well, I'm kind of moseying on through life, waking up each day, doing what I did yesterday, and I guess that's how life works. I'm not really, experiencing anything painful, so I wouldn't want to disrupt anything and potentially cause myself more hardship than pleasure by doing so, right? So you keep going on until one day something happens that really is kind of a wake-up call, right?
Yeah, it really was a wake-up call. For me, it was a real question of where do I find my self-worth? I'd done youth work for a long time. I had, been teacher, ran some nonprofits. I'd been basically serving people my whole entire life. And when you're in those kind of positions, everyone's like, oh, that must be so rewarding, right? You must get so much, joy, and it, must be wonderful to do that all the time. Well, yeah, but still, it's still a freaking job, I mean, you still have to go to work. You still have phone calls at 12 o'clock at night, or at least text messages with teenagers. You still got text messages coming in all the time. And, it's work, and it's daunting. And so I really just wanted to figure out for myself where I found my own self-worth. And I've always been perplexed by the idea that when we meet each other for the first time, we always say, oh, what do you do? Who do you work for? Like after you give your name, like that's the next thing. And I just didn't want to find my self-worth in what I did to sell my labor and to whom I sold it to.
Yeah, we as men do that to each other, don't we? We go to cocktail parties and go, so what do you do? And by what do you do, the implication there is your career.
Oh, yeah.
What is your self-worth derived from in terms of how you're making money for your family? You and I, Roger, have something in common. I was in the youth work profession, working for various nonprofits for most of my 20s. And it's interesting. Now I've changed careers 3 times.
Mm.
And looking back, it would be very accurate to say I've simply crossed those careers off my bucket list. Yeah, they were important to me. They were where my passions were at the time, but there came a day where my work was done. And I think a lot of guys don't realize that, first of all, you can fulfill a life purpose, quote unquote, and get on to another one. I think a lot of times this idea of a quote unquote life purpose is this obelisk, like in 2001, A Space Odyssey, this big black obelisk with like mystery surrounding it. What am I going to do with my life? And when I'm on my deathbed someday, can I say, yeah, you know what? I really nailed it to the wall. I lived life to the fullest. And it's like either you get to that place or you don't. But the truth of the matter is you can accomplish things that were life purposes and move on to the next one. And I'll tell you what, for me in youth work, it was almost like Cars 3, where Lightning McQueen was told by an older car, an older race car, that, the young kids will tell you when it's time to retire. I think that's kind of what happened to me around age 27 or 28. And similarly, when I went into the business world, I thought it would be really cool to get into business and live that world. And it just became empty after a certain expiration date. And I decided I wanted to do this work we're doing now of working with men and women to find love and, be better people. And all of that may come to an end someday when I've completed my work here and it's time to do something else. And in between, I think also you can have parallel life purposes.
Sure.
Right now, being a BMX racing announcer is a big part of my life. I feel like I'm helping a lot of people ease the pain in their lives and have a lot more fun by being there. For many years, as you well know, Emily and I had a major goal of seeing the world and becoming world travelers. And that was kind of a secondary life purpose for sure. If not as philanthropic or able to pay the bills like a couple other life purposes have been, at least it was something we were doing. And parenthood and marriage and all those things can certainly count. So it gets kind of complicated.
Sure.
Yeah, it does. But it's nice to have a list of things you want to accomplish. And I guess those things that are on your list could be almost anything, can't they, Roger?
Yeah, I think that's one of the major misconceptions that people have about a bucket list, right? We saw the movie and they were taking these massive trips around the world and doing all these wonderful things and seeing all these, exotic places. But a bucket list doesn't have to be that, right? It was a plot device in the movie, and we can use that plot device any way we want. I have a client friend that was having struggles coming up with his list. And I was like, okay, well, what are you really into? What do you really like doing? He's like, I like to play golf and I like to learn the history of the United States. And I said, well, have you ever thought about doing a 50-state challenge and trying to see all 50 states? And he's like, yeah, somewhat. And I said, well, why don't you just combine them? why don't you just play golf around the golf in all 50 states and make that just your list? You don't have to add anything else to it. You could just put that on there and that's fine. Right. And I have another client that she's not a very outgoing person. She doesn't like traveling, but she loves Thai food. So once a month, she pulls out a single Thai recipe and she cooks that for the whole month, like 4 or 5 times to master it. And that's what her bucket list is. And once she feels like she's mastered that recipe, she crosses it off the list and she pulls out the next one.
You know, she has my respect already because I've become a pretty good cook. It's one of the things that I'm sort of secretly passionate about. And I've learned how to cook Ethiopian, Indian, Chinese food, certainly Texas barbecue, Mexican food. Thai food is incredibly hard to master.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man. So she has my respect already, like I said. You know, I have a questionnaire that all men fill out when they join my 10-plus coaching program, Roger, and the very first question on it is a bucket list. And rather than simply call it a bucket list, I seed their imagination a little by saying, list 25 things you'd like to see, acquire, or accomplish in your lifetime, which opens it up. And
Sure.
I've had men bonk after 2 or 3 of them, for sure. You know, be happy, stay healthy. And I ask them a similar question that you ask your clients, Roger, which is, well, what interests you? What do you find exciting? What would be fun to go do? And a lot of times they go, well, I've got nothing. And to me, I think that indicates that we have to work on enjoying being alive, you know, being more aware of our surroundings, looking at this world as an apple to take a big bite of. And what I tell guys to do, above and beyond the wonderful suggestions you gave, Roger, is to just go surf YouTube.
Yep.
Or, you know, until you find things that are interesting to watch and go, hey, you know, I'd like to see that. Or simply keep a running journal instead of having writer's block when confronted with the question of a bucket list. Just start actively remembering you have this list you're building, and every time something comes up, put it on there. That's what Emily and I have done. It's what I do with stand-up comedy. It's what I do with newsletter topics, even for dating and relationships. It just really takes away the urgency and the pressure of having to come up with it. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And one of the things I talk about in my book is that you have to look at your bucket list as a living document instead of this rigid list of to-dos. So you can put things on the list, you can accomplish those things and cross them off, and you can also take things off your list if they no longer fit for you. Like Burning Man was something that I thought I wanted to do for a really long time, and it's been on my bucket list for a couple of years now. And, you know, just recently just doing some more research and seeing, you know, the attitude of burners and stuff, and I'm like, I don't know if I want to do that anymore, right? And that's okay.
That sounds good on paper.
Right. Yeah. And there are lots of things about Burning Man I would think I would find and enjoy, but there's some things I don't think I would. And it would also depend on who I went with. But I just think that it's okay for me to say, you know, I'm 52. That may not be the thing I want to do, is spend 8 days out in the desert, you know, with just taking care of myself and not, you know, having a really good shower. And, you know, that may not be on my list anymore. And that should be okay.
You know, one thing that you mentioned a few minutes ago was the idea of jogging your mind to find things to put on the list, not only by coming up with very objective things you'd like to do or places you'd like to go, but the actions associated with going there. And I think kind of adding that meta level to it is really powerful. And indeed, Emily and I, when we're listing places to travel or places to visit, we'll say things like go to Tokyo, Japan and eat kaiten sushi.
There you go.
Or go to Beijing and hike the unrestored Great Wall of China. Or go to Monaco and drive the Grand Prix road course. So we're going there and we're staking our claim of being there by doing something when we're there that sounds fun, or, you know, what that particular locale is known for. And, you know, the same with things we'd like to do. You know, I have a lot of very dorky things on my list simply because I have unique interests. Right?
I bet mine's beach yours. We can talk about that later.
That's probably a tie. Like, I'm a geek for airlines and airplanes. So on my list right now is fly an Airbus A350 because I haven't flown one yet. And I have airlines I've never flown on. And really, the rest of my family could not care less, Roger, how we get there as long as we get there in one piece. But I love this stuff. I have a running tally of every airport I've ever landed in, blah, blah, blah. Breweries, distilleries, those are on my bucket list. Things I'd like to do because they're just weird, or places I'd like to go because I saw a picture and just think it's really cool. Like, for example, my bucket list of places I've yet to go are Iran and Socorro Island in Yemen, just because mostly someone told me I couldn't go there. But also I think both of those places would be fascinating for specific reasons I researched and found out about.
Yeah.
But I love the idea of having very specific things on the bucket list. You mentioned the movie, which of course is wonderful for no other reason than it pairs Morgan Freeman and Jack Nicholson together.
Sure.
Which was fantastic chemistry.
Oh, yeah.
One of the things I specifically remember being on Morgan Freeman's bucket list was see something majestic.
Yep.
And of course he went to the Himalayas to do that. And no spoiler alerts beyond that, but that's basically something he crossed off.
Yeah.
But what does that even mean, right?
Right. Yeah. I think that's probably a little bit vague for me.
I thought so.
But here's the thing, and I will spoil the movie, that, in the end, because I think everybody should watch it anyways, in the end of that movie, what did they finally realize was the most important thing to have on their list? It was to fix their families. That was what was the most important thing for both of them in the end, for Jack Nicholson's character to reconnect with his estranged daughter, and Morgan Freeman to heal stuff with his wife, a relationship that hadn't been going on, hadn't been on fire for, very many years. But they've been together a long time. That's what they found out in the end was most important.
How about that? And getting back to the lists that guys put together when they sign up for coaching with me, at this point, I've seen a whole lot of bucket lists. And to be fair, the vast majority of guys have no problem coming up with a list. Almost always, there are travel items on there.
Mm-hmm.
Almost always, there are financial goals on there. Almost always, there are some sort of recreational goals on there. By the way, your friend who loves golf, they have to slap Augusta National and St. Andrews on that list.
Oh, yeah.
For sure. You got to start listing courses. I have a guy who races cars, and his bucket list, about 5 or 6 of them are racetracks. He wants to drive,
Yeah.
Yeah. And, however, I'm always gratified to see very interpersonal goals on there too.
Sure.
Make sure my aging parents are taken care of. Make sure my kids grow up all right. Repair my relationship with someone, or, reconnect with my best friends from college, things like that. And sometimes guys have spiritual goals on there too, which I think are wonderful. It's very interesting to see how the human mind concocts such lists. But indeed, that idea of having interpersonal bucket list goals, I think shows some depth as a human,
Yeah, and my number one thing in my book and what I talk about with my clients is that you have to set an intention. And I know that word conjures up like woo-woo type stuff, but the reality is that it's just a mission statement. It's just a vision statement. Why are you doing this? If you're just creating a list to keep up with the Joneses, you're probably not going to get the amount of joy out of it as you would. And so that's why I like the examples of yours and Emily's list, where you're like going someplace, but you have an intention of doing something else when you're there. And I have the same type of thing. I'm a huge wrestling fan, have been forever. My son is, my dad was, my grandpa was. And so I want to go to Mexico City and just go to Arena Mexcal and watch a Triple A card. I just want to be in that environment because my intention for my bucket list is I want things to be very communal. I want to do things with other people, whether I know them or I don't know them. I want to do, that's what I want to have happen when I cross these things off, is they either have had time to spend with people I know and love, or I'm meeting new people that I can know and love. And so most things on my list tend to be more communal. And so that's a perfect example for me that my intention is going to be fulfilled by going and do that. It's not just to go to Mexico City and have a vacation. There's a purpose to it. There's a goal, there's drive.
I'm such a curious mofo, Roger, that I just added your item to mine. That sounds like a blast.
Oh my gosh. If you want to go see wrestling, that's about, I mean, it's not in the best place in town, and it's,
which makes it even better.
Oh yeah, exactly. I mean, it's an adventure in itself from what I understand. So it's on my wrestling bucket list. It's probably in the top 3 or 4.
Coincidentally, as well traveled as Emily and I are, Mexico City, along with Vancouver, British Columbia, are probably the 2 easiest places we've never been.
Yeah.
And I've had plane tickets to Mexico City 3 times, and it got canceled each time. Isn't that just nuts?
That is crazy. I think Vancouver's the cleanest city in this hemisphere. I think it's
could be.
It sparkles.
Could be. But I'll tell you what, as far as wrestling goes, my little brother was a huge WWF fan in the 80s.
Right.
And nobody wanted to take him, and I was mildly interested also. And we grew up in Baltimore, which weirdly was a haven for pro wrestling.
Oh, sure.
So belts would change place in Baltimore at the Civic Center downtown. And my brother and I probably went about 7 or 8 times when I was in college and he was a kid, and I bought the tickets, in the summertime, delivered pizza, bought tickets. And we saw Hulk Hogan and Roddy Piper and Andre the Giant and all these legends. And it was way too much fun. Oh, yeah. So I will add the AAA to the bucket list. I don't know where the boundaries of your wrestling interests are, but by far one of the most profound experiences related to anything wrestling was when we went to Tokyo and saw sumo.
In the Tokyo Dome?
Oh, yeah, it was all, well, not the Tokyo Dome. The Tokyo Dome is where the baseball players are. They have a special venue in a special side of town that is actually a temple. It's a religious temple, and they consider sumo wrestling to be a religious art, almost like a church service. And it was just so much more profound and amazing than you would ever guess it is.
Oh no, yeah. I totally understand. It's been very interesting because my son's a fan. My son is a 4th generation fan, so to speak. And so I sat down with my dad and watched it, and it was our bonding point for all of us, like from my grandfather to my son. And so for my son, he grew up in the internet age. So we used to take trips around the Midwest. We lived in Indy, and we would take trips around the Midwest, and we would just go for the weekend, and we would go see a show in Chicago and then loop over to Toledo and then go down, to Cincinnati. And we would just go see these independent shows. And because of the internet, all of this stuff was accessible to him, that he was able to find these independent shows and all those folks that were wrestling during that time period in the early 2010s, they're all the stars now. They're the stars of AEW. They're the stars in NXT, on WWE, and so it was amazing to me that I was able to let that go. And he taught me when he was a teenager, he taught me about the business and showed me a different side of it. And he could go toe for toe with anybody about the stars of New Japan Pro Wrestling. He just is a super fan, and it's because of the internet.
Interesting. So what other things do you have personally on your bucket list, Roger?
Oh, wow. I've only got 2 states left. That's been a big thing for me. I've got Alaska and North Dakota. So those are the last 2 states to hit all 50. The average American hits 12, I think, in their lifetime. So 50 for me. I'm excited about getting that done. Hopefully coming up soon. I have a guy's trip planned for Memphis in May. That is a bucket list item. I'm going with 2 of my best friends from high school, some 35 years ago. And we're going to go to the World Championship of Barbecue in Memphis, Tennessee. So that's exciting. And then I also, that same month, I'll be going to Las Vegas to do a bowling tournament that's called Punk Rock Bowling, where they have a huge punk rock festival. They have a bowling tournament, a charity bowling tournament that anyone can enter. And I'm putting together a team, and we're going to lose really bad. And I just absolutely don't care. I'm excited about it. And I am currently working on learning how to play the ukulele.
Fantastic. Do you know the Martin Guitar Company makes ukuleles?
Oh, yeah.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
I remember I was watching old footage of Tiny Tim because my wife is 5 years younger than me, and almost impossibly enough, as much a part of the zeitgeist of the 70s, that Tiny Tim was. My wife had never heard of him before.
Oh my
She
goodness.
was born in 1971. So I pulled up, a YouTube clip of him playing Tiptoe Through the Tulips famously.
On the Gong Show, I'm sure, maybe?
Oh, I don't know. It was either on, I don't know what show it was on. It might have been on Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In for all.
Oh, there you go.
Or Johnny Carson. He was all over the place back then.
Oh, yeah.
He got married on The Tonight Show to Miss Vicky. It was like the highest rated television event of all time when it happened. I mean, that's how absolutely meteoric this guy's 15 minutes of fame were, right?
Right.
But I noticed, having since become a guitar player in my adulthood, that, the headstock of his ukulele said Martin Guitar Company on it, which of course are the most legendary acoustic instruments, right? And it just kind of made me smile that Tiny Tim only had the very best ukulele, right?
Right.
Fantastic. I should probably put that on my bucket list too, because being a guitar player, I could probably, make short work of a ukulele at some point.
Yeah, it's a good travel instrument too. I think that's part of it for me. I want to be able to travel and take it with me and be able to play music instead of taking a guitar halfway across the world. And just recently, before I quit my career, I was working with youth here in the Seattle area, and we have a large population of South Pacific and Islander folks. So it's very popular amongst the kids. So I got exposed to it that way.
How about that? It would be great to be able to play a ukulele just to make everybody feel like they're temporarily in Hawaii, because everybody would love you for that,
But I'm working on like 70s rock songs is what I'm working on, like the Allman Brothers and that kind of stuff. The bands. I'm trying to learn the ukulele for those songs.
Black Dog by Led Zeppelin.
That's probably a little
song.
Yeah. I mean, you can find it. Uke Tabs is out there. You can any song you want. You can find it on a ukulele.
I'd love to find an arrangement for ukulele of, say, AC/DC songs.
Yeah,
that would involve some talent.
Yeah, well, there's a lot out there. You'd be surprised. Uke Tabs, like I said, you can find just about anything. You just type in the artist, and it'll show you what songs they have for them.
That reminds me, a lot of times, when artists do something weird or offbeat, it really gets received very well. I'm reminded of the time Mick Jagger said the absolute best cover of Satisfaction ever was the one by Devo. Which, of course, sounded nothing like the Rolling Stones version.
Sure.
Yeah. So I have to ask, apart from the travel and the barbecue and the bowling and the wrestling, what is the strangest, most obscure item you would say is on your bucket list right now? Maybe the most interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard because it's kind of mine, right? I mean, I really try to push people to be like, don't just do everything everybody else does. So what might be strange to other people, isn't strange to me. So it's kind of hard for me to look at the list. I'm pretty much a minimalist. I don't buy a lot of stuff. I'm not into consumer culture that much. But I have something I want to buy on my bucket list that would cost me about $25,000. And it's a comic book from 1958 where I have a comic book collection. I only collect a specific title, and it is the first appearance of that title. And I don't have that. I have everything from 1958 to today, except for about 4 books, and that's one of them, and the most expensive one. So it's about $25,000 is what I would have to pay to get it in condition that's not perfect, but like the same kind of condition for the rest of my collection. So like mid-high grade. But yeah, that's on my bucket list. And I want to do it, of course, at San Diego Comic-Con. So like you say, stacking those things up and making a purpose out of it. So
well, sounds legit to me.
Yeah.
I would say if your bucket list isn't deeply personal, then you might indeed be following the herd, not thinking for yourself.
Yeah, it's super hard to do, right? I was gonna earlier when you said look stuff up and get on YouTube, and hashtags are great if people use them, right? And so you can hashtag bucket list, and you can see lots of different things, but you're gonna find a truckload of pictures of flying in a hot air balloon in Cappadocia, right? In Turkey,
which was on our bucket list.
Yeah, and which is totally fine, and which is totally fine, and I'm sure it was a wonderful experience. But are you doing it just because everybody's doing it, or are you doing it because there's something romantic for you and Emily, or is there something, is there some kind of connection family wise, or, why are you doing the things you're doing? And as long as you have some kind of response to that, I'm good, right? If you're just going, I don't know why I'm doing that. For you all, it could have been part of getting those 100 countries. It's okay for it to be about travel. It's okay to get out of your comfort zone, for that to be the reason, but just have a reason, right? The reason can't be I saw it on Instagram.
Well, it can be. I have a few that were about that simple. I saw, for example, a YouTube video that was taken at the Devil's Swimming Pool.
Yep.
At Victoria Falls in Zambia. And I rushed into the other room and said to Emily, we are doing this. This is way too cool. And that was the first time I'd ever seen it before. I can answer your Cappadocia question, by the way. Mm-hmm. We did that. We did that with both of our youngest kids.
Oh, nice.
The reason why was, first of all, we wanted to go to Cappadocia, and that's what you do when you're in Cappadocia. I had always wanted to fly in a hot air balloon. To me, it just seems so exotic because every time you even see a hot air balloon, you go, wow, look in the sky, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it seemed to me something that very few people got to do. And to me, that was the mecca of hot air ballooning.
Sure.
What cooler way to go hot air ballooning than at the coolest place ever with 100 other hot air balloons the same morning you did? So to me, it just made sense.
Yeah, the hot air balloon festival in New Mexico is probably pretty good too. But I understand it's not Turkey. I understand New Mexico is not Turkey.
Well, there are indeed a couple other factors in play. It probably was a lot less expensive to fly 4 people in a hot air balloon one morning in Cappadocia than to do so in New Mexico.
Sure.
Also, I'm not sure I have a ticket to a hot air balloon in New Mexico. Those are pretty limited and it's pretty much a private thing, but this was something you could freely go do.
So, Scott, I would go back to the whole, what excited you about seeing that Devil's Hole and swimming in that Devil's Hole? What was the drive that you had to jump up and go rush to Emily and say, oh my gosh, we have to do this? Why was it so exciting? 2
things. First of all, it was something that seemed impossibly dangerous and daring that I didn't know of anybody else who had ever done it. Second of all, we were already planning a trip to sub-Saharan Africa, and we wanted to go to Victoria Falls anyway, and that kind of just sealed it.
Okay. So for me, hearing that part of it, it's you found inspiration someplace else to do this, and that's okay. But just saying I'm going to do it because other people are doing it is not a drive to find joy in your life. What I know of you is that you're an extreme sports guy. You like to do exciting things. That's part of your nature. So seeing that ignited that flame in you, that it's something that's a part of you. That's a good calling to put something on your bucket list. If you've just seen the picture of it 10,000 times on Instagram, I go, well, I guess everybody's going. There's no call there. And so that's what I'm talking about. It's that inner call of saying, I have to do this for whatever reason. That's fine. You can find the inspiration wherever, but is there that drive, that call inside of you that's like, oh, I have to do this? For me, it was the Camino de Santiago. It's a 790-kilometer trek across northern Spain. Takes about 30 days. There was just something to like, I had to go do this. I had to go complete this thing. It was the start of my bucket list lifestyle, and I was just like, I have to go complete something so I can feel confident that no matter what I choose, I can do this. So it's got to be a big, hairy, audacious goal. And I was just drawn to it. I was drawn to the community aspects of it. I was drawn to the never having been to Europe part. There was just so many things about it, but I was drawn to do that. And I think that that's super important.
Well, I think you make a fantastic point. If I'm simply following the herd, there's not a whole lot of passion there.
Right.
It starts to feel like work to go out and do something at that point. It's not that I want to do it. I feel compelled or that I have to do it for some reason.
Right.
Which is no fun. I mean, it defeats the whole purpose of having a bucket list. Now, as you've already duly noted, I'm not only curious, but I'm greedy about it. I'm looking to carry too much out of this life once it's over, that I've accomplished or done or seen or whatever. Someone once accused me of being the person who enjoys being alive more than anybody they've ever met. I often wonder why people aren't so interested in interesting things and how they can't possibly care about things that are inherently just unusual or exciting. just because they're different than what that person is used to seeing or used to doing. It's just outside of their experience enough that they go, well, that's irrelevant. I love learning new things. I love seeing new things. That's probably why I'll almost never refuse any opportunity to see something different or visit a different culture, etc. But this kind of dovetails into the last question I was actually going to ask you, Roger, which is, what would you say to a guy listening to this show who's thinking to himself, why would I even do this? This seems completely irrelevant to me. I don't even see why this would be interesting. What if I don't want to go somewhere? What if I don't want to do anything? What if I'm perfectly content to be a couch potato? What's my reason why? And you've already given a little bit of a window into the answer I'm expecting you to give, saying, well, you know what? It ignites your passions. It really gets you in tune with thinking for yourself and doing what you want to do and making your own plans rather than simply following the herd. But I'm sure you have much more to say on that, so go for it.
Yeah. So, Scott, I really think it's about finding the joy in your life. And if you find joy in sitting on the couch and binge watching, Yellowstone, that's fine, right? I mean, does it feed your soul? Like you said, does it feed your soul? Does it bring you joy? And the only person that we can count on to do that in walking around with us right now is ourselves. We can't rely on our partners. We can't rely on our wives. We can't rely on our children. We can only rely on ourselves to do that. And the example that, is pretty common, I think, with inside most coaches, no matter what you're coaching people through, is that, self-care is a massively important thing. And I feel like guys, especially, do not do that. We have been taught all of our lives that we need to sacrifice for our family, sacrifice for our wives, sacrifice for our friends. We have to sacrifice. And that just gets depleting over time. And I did that. I did that for 30 years. I was married for 25 and then another 5. And finally I just said, I love my family. I love my partner. I love my coworkers, but I've got to feed myself. And so I've found that the way for me to do that is to intentionally cross things off my bucket list that I get personal joy out of that. And an example would be that when I did the Camino de Santiago, it takes 30 days. I went to my partner and said, hey, I'm going to go do this. And she was like, oh, she knew about it. We had talked about it multiple times. I was constantly talking about it, actually, to a default, I'm sure. But, she's like, I'm not sure I want to do it all. And I'm like, okay, well, I wasn't sure I was going to ask you to go with, to begin with, because I do kind of want to do it on my own. And she goes, oh, she said, well, I think I want to go back to Spain, and I've never really traveled as an adult before on my own, and to that extent. And so I think I want to do that too. She'd done some traveling, but nothing like planning for herself and doing her own thing. And so we came to a really, really good bargain, right? A really good compromise. I went to France at the beginning of August and walked across the Pyrenees and started my journey. A week and a half later, she got on a plane and went to Madrid and Seville and Malaga and Barcelona. And she went to all these places for like 2 weeks. And we met in Syria, Spain, and walked the last 5 days together. Stayed in a little bit more upscale hostels, had our own rooms and bathrooms and that kind of stuff. So she was a little bit more comfortable, but we did those last 5 days together. We both got completions of certificates of completion, and it worked out. There needs to be space for yourself so that you can recharge, so you can be the best man that you want to be for your family, for your kids, for your wife, for your boss, all those things. You got to figure out a way to bring yourself joy and recharge.
I agree with that 100%. It's almost like when you're on an airliner and they say, put your own mask on before you help somebody else. A lot of us as guys burn ourselves out doing and working and achieving on behalf of everybody else in our lives, but we forget that self-care. Now, I would add 2 thoughts to that, kind of in closing the show here. The first one is almost everyone in this culture, North American middle-class culture, budgets last for interesting, fun adventures. That's the last thing that gets budgeted for. What if it was further up the totem pole, than buying that bigger BMW than my neighbors have, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's the first challenge I would issue to these guys relative to building a bucket list is, what do you want to do? How important would the adventure be? As we said on your show, Emily and I, when we did your show, which was wonderful, by the way, and you guys, I'm going to point you to it in a couple minutes. Nobody can repossess our experiences. No one can come take those away. They don't rust out. They don't get lost. They don't break. They will always be there. The other thing that I would add to this conversation is, while I agree with you wholeheartedly that we as men need to be inspired by our own passions, by those things which we dream in our own heads, the goals, the purposes that we want, that we're passionate about. I will say that women are wired a little bit differently. Women love men who lead, and they love men who inspire them. So while your partner, like you said, may say, I don't think I want to do the entire trip, but I think maybe I would like to do part of it with you. She was inspired to some degree, although there's always middle ground and there's always wiggle room. But there are a lot of women out there who are very bored. And I'll tell you, gentlemen, if you're a guy who shows up with nothing in this regard, let's just go watch reruns together, lay on the couch and do nothing. Don't be surprised when she's not hot for you sexually.
There you go.
Because you're not bringing anything. Masculinity leads. Masculinity inspires. Masculinity acts in the best interest of a woman and, by extension, to a man's family. And when you bring adventure, when you bring fun, when you bring excitement, when you bring a zest for life, not only are you inspiring a woman to go out and do things, you're also lifting that fear she may have. Because you're a man in her life. I think we said on your show, there's no way that my wife would have gone to North Korea by herself. And there's no way I can really stop an Otto Warmbier situation from happening to my wife and I if the North Koreans want that to happen. But for some crazy reason, she felt safer because I was on that trip with her. So there is this inspiration and this encouragement and this cover of safety that men bring to a woman's world in extending the hand of friendship and adventure to her that women love to take hold of and join.
Yeah, I can wholeheartedly agree with that. For this Christmas before we went to Spain, I gave her a bracelet it wasn't like super expensive. It wasn't gold. It was wood. And then the center of the bracelet was carved the longitude and latitude of Sarria, Spain, where we were going to meet. And so the whole time we were both on that trip, I had the exact same bracelet. And so we were wearing this bracelet of, we are going to be together in this spot on the other side of the planet. So we're going to meet here. And I'll just be honest. She may not like it, but I mean, that was a really good night for us. I mean, that night when we finally got together, we were both super tired. I'd been walking for like 25 days. She had been, traveling all around Spain for 2.5 weeks. I mean, a lot of travel. We were both tired, but it did not affect anyone's performance that night. We were excited to see each other. It was romantic. The whole gesture was romantic. There may not have been candlelights and the soft music, but it was romantic. It was a romantic thing to go on this adventure together, to allow each other to have space and then to come back together and continue that adventure till its completion.
Well, see, the candlelight and the soft music would have been somebody else's bucket list.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, that would have been what someone else told you had to do.
Yeah.
But because you have that connection with her, you created your own moment. And I just think that's magical. That's what it's all about. And you seeded that moment by giving her that bracelet, which is great, Fantastic. His name is Roger Williams. He's the head crosser offer at the Crossing It Off podcast, which you can go to not only by going to crossingitoffpodcast.com, but by going to mountaintoppodcast.com/Roger, Roger. He's the first Roger we've ever had on the show.
Nice.
Roger. Yeah, man. Thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a fantastic and fun conversation, sir.
Well, thanks for having me, Scott. I really enjoyed our time with you and Emily on my show. So I'm so glad I can repay the favor.
Yeah, man. And I'm sure glad you did. Gentlemen, if you have not been to mountaintoppodcast.com lately, visit our sponsors, Origin in Maine, Keyport, and Heroes Soap. We have those sponsors for a reason. We believe in their products. Their products are amazing, and they will contribute to your masculinity. The links for all three are there at mountaintoppodcast.com, and be sure to use the coupon code MOUNTAIN10 with each of the three to get an additional 10% off your order. Also, check into the master classes, gentlemen. I'm doing one every month on a different topic that is central to your existence as a man and your success with women. mountaintoppodcast.com/masterclass is the direct link, or you can click on the graphic at mountaintoppodcast.com to check them out. Get on my calendar. Talk to me for free for 25 minutes so we can figure out where you are right now, where you want to be in terms of your success level with women. Won't cost you a dime. You're going to figure out very quickly, guys, that I'm exactly who you expect me to be. I don't play a fictional character on this particular show or anything. So I look forward to talking to you guys every time. All of you guys listening to this show are men of character. A lot of you are high achievers. What you all have in common is a deep respect for yourselves and for women. And it's just about time to get you the right woman into your life to share this all with. Sign up at mountaintoppodcast.com. And until I talk to you again real soon, this is Scot McKay from X&Y Communications in San Antonio, Texas. Be good out there.
The Mountaintop Podcast is produced by X&Y Communications. All rights reserved worldwide. Be sure to visit www.mountaintoppodcast.com for show notes. And while you're there, sign up for the free X&Y Communications newsletter for men. This is Ed Roy Odom speaking for the Mountaintop Podcast.